they said. "It's safer this way, Grandma. Just sign it." I was standing in the kitchen, holding a wooden spoon, still warm from stirring soup, when my daughter handed me the folder. I hadn't even sat down yet. The table was still cluttered from lunch. My tea hadn't steeped. And yet there it was. The kind of folder that smelled like pressure and legalese. Margaret said it gently, like I was a child who needed coaxing. Her husband, Dean, didn't say much, but he stood behind her with that stiff smile of his, the one he uses at holiday dinners. "We've talked to the lawyer," Margaret continued. "It's all above board. This is just to make sure if anything happens, we can act quickly. For your safety. You know how things are these days. Scams, fraud, all that." I looked down at the papers. Trust. Durable power of attorney. Transfer upon death. Everything typed up in neat, legal font. Dean had even marked the signature lines with little yellow stickers. "You don't need to read through it all right now," Margaret said. "It's standard stuff. We just want to be able to help if anything comes up. Like, God forbid you fall again." I hadn't fallen. I'd tripped once on the garden hose while watering the azaleas, but that was last spring. I was 78, not made of glass. The kettle whistled. I turned toward it, grateful for the sound, but Margaret took over. "Let me, Mom," she said, pouring the water into my mug. I stood still, holding the folder. The signature line stared at me like a dare. Dean cleared his throat. "And the market's good right now. I mean, if you ever do decide to sell the house, this just makes it smoother. Less headache." My hands tensed. I didn't say anything, but my grip tightened just slightly around the folder. "I'm not selling my house," I said. Quietly, evenly. "Of course not," Margaret said quickly. "We know. We just want to be prepared in case anything happens. It's safer this way, Grandma. Just sign it." It was the second time she said it, and the first time she called me Grandma instead of Mom in her adult voice, like I'd already turned into someone else. I put the folder down. "I'll think about it," I said. "We really need to submit this week," Dean said, a little too fast. "The lawyer already did the prep work." "And I really need to read what I'm signing," I replied, with just enough edge that Margaret tilted her head. That night, I sat on the couch with my glasses and the folder in my lap. My hands smelled faintly of garlic and dish soap. I didn't know what I was looking for. I'd never dealt with trust transfers or power of attorney documents. Derek used to handle all that. My late husband, a postman with a firm handshake and no patience for jargon. I flipped pages slowly. Margaret had highlighted certain sections, things she wanted me to see, but I didn't care about the yellow. I read the black ink, the clauses, the transfer rights, the dates, my name. I set the folder down at midnight, my eyes dry and my tea cold. There was something tight in my chest that had nothing to do with cholesterol. I didn't sleep well. The next day, Margaret came back, without Dean this time. She brought blueberry muffins from that cafe on Elm she knows I like. She didn't mention the folder right away, just chatted about Rebecca's piano recital and Toby's orthodontist. We sat at the kitchen table like two women pretending we were still close. Finally, after a lull, she said, "Did you have a chance to look through it?" "I did," I answered. "And? I'm not comfortable signing it yet." There was a pause. Margaret took a sip of her coffee. "Is it something in the documents, or just, you don't trust us?" I looked at her then, really looked. My daughter, the girl I held through a fever, who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, now asking if I trusted her. "It's not that I don't trust you," I said. "It's that this isn't a small thing, and I've earned the right to think about it." She nodded, too quickly, like someone taught not to argue with the elderly. Later that evening, I noticed something odd. My medication, the evening pills I always kept in a little organizer on the counter, had more tablets than usual. The refill was too recent. I hadn't taken them last night. I frowned. Had I forgotten? Or had someone refilled them? I shook off the thought, put on the kettle, watched the steam rise. When I went to bed, the folder was gone from the table. I checked the kitchen, the couch, my bedroom. Nothing. At 11:05 p.m., I heard a soft knock on the front door. Strange for that hour. I opened it cautiously. Dean was there, alone. "Sorry to come by so late," he said, holding a small manila envelope. "You dropped this in the car yesterday." He handed it to me and left before I could say anything. Inside was the folder. But something about the papers was different. The pages were out of order. The stickers had moved. And the signature line, the one marked Leslie Evelyn Jarvis, had a faint indentation, like a heavy hand had practiced. I didn't sleep at all that night. When I woke up, the house didn't feel like mine. Something in the air was off. Not the temperature or the light, but a stillness. The kind of quiet that comes after something's already happened. My joints ached more than usual. My mouth was dry. I reached for my glass of water on the nightstand and noticed the time. 9:40 a.m. Too late. I always woke before 7. I shuffled into the kitchen, still in my robe, and saw my pill organizer open on the counter. The Monday and Tuesday sections were empty. But it was only Tuesday morning. I didn't remember taking them last night. I certainly didn't remember taking them this morning. Had I doubled the dose by accident? The back door was ajar. That never happened. I always locked it at night. Always. "Margaret?" I called out, walking carefully across the tile floor. No answer. I peered outside, expecting to see her car. The driveway was empty. In the living room, 2 of my framed photographs had been moved. One of Derek holding baby Margaret, and another of our first dog. They now leaned against the wall instead of hanging. Dust outlines marked where they'd been. The house smelled faintly of cologne. I walked through the rooms, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. A drawer in my hallway credenza was half open. My checkbook was gone. Something was wrong. And then, just as I returned to the kitchen, the doorbell rang. 2 people stood on my porch, a woman in a navy blazer and a man with a clipboard. Both smiled with a politeness that made my skin prickle. "Mrs. Jarvis?" the woman asked. "Yes? We're from Hendricks and Whitlow Realty. We're just here to confirm the key exchange and final walkthrough. Congratulations on your closing." I stared at them. "What closing?" The woman hesitated. "The house sale, ma'am. Your daughter arranged everything. The buyers will arrive at noon." My knees nearly buckled. "There's no sale," I said slowly. "I haven't sold anything." The man shifted uncomfortably. "We have signed documents from yesterday afternoon. Power of attorney. Transfer of deed. Your daughter assured us it was all under control." I stood there in my robe, barefoot, feeling the cold from the tile floor crawl up my legs like ice. No one told me. "I didn't sign anything." The woman's face softened. "Ma'am, perhaps you should call your daughter. We're just the intermediaries." They left me with a card and apologetic glances, stepping off the porch like they'd delivered a cake to the wrong house. I closed the door, locked it, turned the bolt with shaking hands. Then I called Margaret. She didn't answer. I called again. Again. Nothing. On the 4th try, Dean picked up. "Hey, Evelyn," he said casually, like it was any other morning. "Everything okay?" "What's going on?" I asked. My voice came out tight, almost hoarse. "Why are real estate agents on my porch saying I sold my house?" There was a pause, a short one. not long enough for surprise. Oh, right. We meant to come by and talk to you this morning. The buyers were on a deadline. We figured it was best to get everything moving while the paperwork was fresh. I never signed anything, I said, teeth clenched. Well, technically you did. Another pause. You must not remember. Yesterday afternoon, Margaret said you were groggy, but you gave the okay. It was all within your rights, the trust, remember? I gripped the edge of the counter. I didn't agree to sell my home. You gave us authority, he said. That was the whole point. Look, Evelyn, it's going to be fine. The money's already in a temporary holding account. You'll be comfortable. Margaret found you a beautiful assisted living place just across town. You'll have your own room, your own bathroom. No stairs. He said it like I was a dog being offered a warm corner and a new bowl. You drugged me, I said quietly. You touched my medicine. Dean sighed. We just gave you what the doctor prescribed. Maybe you were tired, Evelyn. Stress can affect memory. I hung up. 5 minutes later, Margaret sent a text. Mom, please don't make a scene. We did this to protect you. The house was too much. Let's talk after you've rested. I stared at the screen. My hands trembled. Outside, a moving truck was pulling into the driveway. A man in a polo shirt stepped out with a clipboard. I walked to the bedroom. The drawers were half empty. Someone had packed me. My dresses, my photo albums, even my slippers. Folded, boxed, labeled, like I'd already died. There was a bag on the bed. My bag. A fresh change of clothes and a folder inside. I opened it. The name of a senior residence was printed at the top. Sunny Hollow Life Care. Welcome, Evelyn Jarvis. There was a note in Margaret's handwriting, clipped to the front. You'll be happier there. No yard work. No worries. Let the past go, Mom. We love you. Trust us. I sat down on the edge of the bed and stared out the window. The tree Derek planted when Margaret was born was starting to turn color. That tree had grown through storms, droughts, decades, and they were going to leave it behind, just like me. And I knew, in that moment, there was no going back. They'd already closed the sale. They hadn't asked. They hadn't waited. They'd planned this, down to the pills, the movers, the sweet talk, the smile. The only thing they hadn't counted on was me waking up. They said it would be temporary. Just a few nights, Margaret assured me, until things settled down. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I didn't even pack. There was nothing left to pack. A black car arrived by late afternoon, driven by a quiet young man in a navy shirt and too much cologne. Mrs. Jarvis? He asked, opening the door like I was a guest of honor. I slid into the back seat with my handbag, the one Derek gave me for our 40th anniversary. It still smelled faintly of leather and rose lotion. The ride to Sunny Hollow was longer than I expected. Farther than just across town. 15 minutes out, I realized they'd driven me across county lines. The scenery changed. Sidewalks disappeared. Trees grew denser. Houses were replaced by large fences and security gates. My hands clenched in my lap. Sunny Hollow looked like a country club, all fresh white paint and wide porches. But the moment the automatic doors hissed open, I felt it. The air inside was different, filtered, watched, too clean. A receptionist with a fixed smile greeted me like I'd won a prize. We're so happy to welcome you, Mrs. Jarvis, she chirped. You'll be in Maple Hall, just down the west corridor. Do you need a wheelchair? I'll walk, I said. The hallway was lined with paintings of birds and sailboats, artificial flowers in vases, carpet so thick it tried to swallow your feet. The woman led me to a small room, barely larger than a motel suite, with pale furniture and a single window that faced a parking lot. Your daughter picked out this room personally, she said proudly, as if that made it better. There was a twin bed with floral linens, a small dresser, and a plastic chair by the window. On the nightstand sat a laminated welcome packet and a bright yellow pill organizer, already filled. "I don't take that brand," I said, pointing at the unfamiliar bottles. "Oh, your daughter brought them herself," the woman replied. "Everything's been arranged. Dinner is at 5:30, orientation at 6. Your social calendar starts tomorrow." Social calendar. I stood still as she left, and the door clicked shut behind her. That was when the silence began. No familiar creaks from the porch. No birds outside the kitchen window. No wind through the old trees Derek used to trim in spring. Just the hum of air vents and the occasional wheel of a walker passing in the hallway. I sat on the bed and tried to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. I felt like I'd slipped out of my own life and into someone else's. I picked up the welcome packet. Rules, curfews, meal plans, group therapy schedules, room checks, and no mention of how to leave. I tried calling Margaret, straight to voicemail. Tried Dean, busy tone. Left messages, not angry ones, not yet. Just, "Call me. Please explain. I don't understand." An hour passed. No one answered. At 5:30, a soft knock. A young girl with a tray. "Dinner, Mrs. Jarvis," she said politely, wheeling in a covered plate. Mashed potatoes, green beans, soft chicken in bland gravy. No salt on the table. I ate 3 bites, pushed the rest away, then opened the pill organizer. Inside were 2 capsules I didn't recognize. I didn't take them. Instead, I waited until dark, turned off the lights, and sat near the door. Just to see. Just to feel. At 9, someone jiggled the handle, not knocked, not called my name, just tried to open the door. I stayed still. They left. The next morning, I asked to speak to a nurse. "I have questions about my medication," I said. "Of course," she smiled, scribbling something on a chart. "But everything has been cleared through your daughter. She's your medical proxy now." That was it. The word proxy. They'd taken everything, not just my house, but my name, my decisions, my agency. And the worst part? They did it with paperwork and polite smiles. They did it like they were helping. That afternoon, I met a woman named Gladys in the common room. She had white curls and sharp eyes. We played cards while the TV played something cheerful and fake. "They say you're new," she said. "Don't look new, you look pissed." I laughed, despite myself. "They moved me here without asking. Sold my house. Took my things." Gladys laid down a card. "Sounds familiar." I looked at her. She nodded. "They tricked me too. Said I had dementia. I don't. Took control of everything before I could fight back." My chest tightened. "How long have you been here?" I asked. 18 months. "Have you tried leaving?" She smiled. Not a happy smile. "I tried. Called a lawyer. My son intercepted the mail, changed my contact list, even had the staff screen my calls. But that's illegal." She shrugged. "Only if someone fights it." I stared at the deck of cards between us. The bright colors looked absurd against the weight in my stomach. "Do you have anyone?" I asked. "Anyone who believes you?" Gladys leaned forward. "You're asking the wrong question." "What is it then?" She looked me in the eye. "Do you believe you?" I didn't answer. I just looked out the window at the parking lot, at the locked gates, at the life that wasn't mine anymore. But something inside me, something quiet and cold, began to shift. They put me here because they thought I'd be quiet. But I was never the quiet type. By Thursday morning, I had a plan. Not a full one, not yet, but enough to get my shoes on, tuck my handbag under my arm, and start walking the perimeter. The hallway was busy with aides and slow-moving residents pushing walkers. The scent of antiseptic lingered behind every closed door, but no one stopped me when I passed the main desk. Maybe because I moved like I belonged, or maybe because they thought I wouldn't go far. Outside, the air was heavy with early autumn heat. The grass was too green, unnaturally trimmed. A row of identical bushes lined the walkway like polite guards. I walked past the fountain, around the staff parking lot, and toward the side entrance. The one labeled Service and Deliveries. No one was watching it. I could tell. The cameras pointed elsewhere. The gate was locked, but a gardener with a leaf blower stepped aside and let me pass. I thanked him and kept walking. 2 blocks down, I found a bench and caught my breath. Then I pulled out my phone and called Linda Kessler. Linda had been my neighbor for 30 years, a retired notary, sharp as a knife and twice as loyal. I hadn't spoken to her in months, not since Derek's memorial last spring. Margaret always said she was too nosy, but I always thought she just saw too much. She picked up on the second ring. "Evelyn?" "Linda," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I need your help." 10 minutes later, she pulled up in a pale blue Buick, wearing a windbreaker and sunglasses, like a woman going to war. When I got into her car, she looked at me hard. "You look like hell," she said. "Feel worse," I replied. "Start talking." I told her everything, from the folder on the kitchen table to the sale, to the pills, to the fake cheer in the hallways of Sunny Hollow. By the time I was done, Linda's jaw was tight enough to crack glass. "Do you have the original trust paperwork?" she asked. "No." Margaret took the folder. "And you're sure you never signed anything about selling the house?" "I signed something, but not that. I was groggy, maybe medicated. I never saw final pages. Never agreed to sale terms." Linda nodded. "We'll need a copy of whatever was filed. I'll call the registrar's office. Get the deed history. And the notary," I added. "Who witnessed it?" "I'll get the log." She drove us to her house, a modest 2-bedroom with ivy climbing the porch railing. The same place she and her late husband had lived since the 60s. She made coffee, strong, black, no sugar, just how I liked it. "You're staying here for now," she said, handing me a mug. "They think they've got you penned in. We'll see how long that lasts." I exhaled. For the first time in days, I felt like I was back on solid ground. Linda opened her laptop and got to work. She typed faster than any woman our age should reasonably type. I sat on the couch, watching the sun move across her carpet like it used to across mine. Half an hour later, she turned to me with a grim expression. "They filed the house transfer yesterday," she said. "It's already recorded. Deed's been updated. Your name's gone." I looked down at my hands. They trembled slightly. "But the notary on record?" she continued. "Some guy named Stephen Clay. Never heard of him. Works out of Dean's office complex." "Dean's accountant." "Exactly. The signature was witnessed by Clay and someone named M. Jarvis." "Margaret," I said. Linda nodded. "The signature date?" "Same day you called me and sounded groggy. You remember anything at all?" "Dean came by late that night," I murmured. "Said I dropped the folder in the car. Gave it back to me. But the papers weren't in the same order. The signature line was marked differently. I didn't sign it, not knowingly." "That's called coercion," Linda said, standing up. "Possibly fraud. Definitely abuse of power of attorney. If they altered documents after drugging you, they'll say I was confused, old, forgetful." Linda's eyes flashed. "Then let's remind them who you are." We spent the rest of the afternoon calling lawyers. Most wanted retainers. Some asked if I had a recent medical evaluation. One even suggested mediation with the family. "I'm not interested in an apology brunch," I said. Finally, Linda found a firm that specialized in elder financial abuse. They listened, carefully, asked questions that didn't condescend. By 4 p.m., we had a consultation booked for the next morning. "They'll try to stonewall," Linda warned me. "Margaret and Dean will act innocent, claim it was all to protect you. But if we can prove altered documents or lack of informed consent, we can fight this, even if the house is gone." "I want my name back," I said. "More than the house, I want my voice back." Linda raised her mug. To voices. We clinked coffee like it was champagne. That night, I slept on Linda's pull-out couch. The mattress was thin and the blanket scratchy, but I fell asleep to the sound of wind in the ivy and the comforting creak of old plumbing. Not vents, not hushed steps in sterile hallways. I woke at dawn with a clear mind and a firmer spine. They sold the house while I slept, but they made one mistake. They didn't check if I'd wake up fighting. We arrived at the lawyer's office 10 minutes early. It was a quiet building, tucked between a florist and a dentist. Nothing grand or intimidating. Just a small brass plaque. Greer, Langston and Meyer, attorneys at law. Linda parked with the confidence of someone who never second-guessed reverse. I, on the other hand, sat still for a moment, hands folded tightly in my lap. "You ready?" she asked. "No," I answered honestly. "But I'm going in anyway." Inside, the waiting room was calm. Soft chairs, neutral tones, a fish tank bubbling in the corner. A young assistant offered us water, which I declined. I didn't want anything I hadn't poured myself. Then a door opened and a tall woman in a navy suit stepped out. "Mrs. Jarvis, I'm Eleanor Greer. Please come in." Her handshake was firm, her eyes sharper than most. She didn't look at me like a case. She looked like someone who'd seen too much and stopped being shocked by any of it. I liked her immediately. We sat down in her office, a modest space lined with books and old case photos. Linda took the chair beside me and pulled out her folder. "I've reviewed the documents from the registrar's office," she began. "The deed transfer, the power of attorney, the notary log. There are inconsistencies." Eleanor nodded. "I've looked them over too. Mrs. Jarvis, do you recall signing a deed or any document explicitly authorizing the sale of your home?" "No," I said. "I was given a folder, told it was for safety. My daughter said it was a precaution. I didn't see any mention of a sale. Not directly." "Were you under any medication at the time?" "I was. Prescribed sleeping aids. But I believe they added something. I felt heavy, disoriented. I slept longer than usual. I woke up to strangers on my porch saying the house had been sold." Eleanor made a note. "And the signature on the deed? It looks like mine, but I didn't sign it consciously." She nodded again, slowly. "It's not the first time we've seen this. In recent years, we've handled a rise in elder financial abuse cases, especially from family. The law is catching up, but it's still complicated." "Complicated how?" I asked. "Well," she said, folding her hands, "we'll need to prove a few key things. 1, that you lacked full knowledge or capacity at the time of signing. 2, that the documents were altered or misrepresented. 3, that the notary did not witness a clear, voluntary signature." Linda slid the logbook forward. "The notary, Stephen Clay, logged the visit at 3:30 p.m., but Evelyn remembers Dean coming by closer to 11. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "That's a significant discrepancy." "He could have filled it in retroactively," Linda added, "or lied outright. Either way, it's suspicious." Eleanor turned back to me. "Would you be willing to undergo a cognitive assessment to establish that you're of sound mind now and were likely of sound mind then, at least until sedated?" "Gladly," I said. We'll also request security footage from Dean's office complex, she continued. If the notary claims he witnessed a signature there, we'll want to see if Evelyn ever entered the building. Linda grinned. She didn't. That day she was home all afternoon. I brought over tomatoes from the garden. We sat on the porch. Eleanor smiled slightly. Good. You're a credible witness. Let's say we prove all that, I asked. What then? If the court deems the transfer invalid, she said, the sale can be reversed. Or if the house has already changed hands to a third party, we can demand full restitution, the market value plus damages. I don't care about the money, I said. I care that they did it behind my back, that they looked me in the face and lied. And they will lie again, Eleanor warned. They'll say they did it for your safety, that you agreed, that they were overwhelmed. Family courts are flooded with these excuses. Let them try, I said, my voice steady. Let them stand in front of a judge and say they drugged their mother for her own good. Eleanor slid a form across the table. Let's get started. We spent the next hour filling out affidavits, statements, and formal requests. Linda provided timelines, phone logs, even a copy of a message Margaret had sent her months earlier, joking about how hard it is to get Mom to do what's best for her. By the time we walked out of that office, I felt taller somehow, not because I was confident we'd win, that wasn't guaranteed, but because I'd said out loud what had happened. I had put it on record. They took my home while I slept, but they didn't take my memory. They didn't take my name. And now, they couldn't take my silence. Outside, the afternoon sun hit us full on. Linda shaded her eyes. You know, she said, if Margaret finds out we're lawyering up, she's going to play innocent, say it was all a big misunderstanding. I hope she does, I said. Because that means she's worried. That night, back at Linda's house, I sat by her fireplace and opened an old photo album. Derek in his postal uniform. Margaret as a child, laughing. Our front porch, the old one, before we rebuilt the railing. I ran my finger along the edge of the page. They think memory fades, but mine was just beginning to sharpen. The house was still there, but it wasn't mine anymore. Linda and I drove past it late Friday afternoon, under the excuse of seeing it for ourselves. She insisted on being the one behind the wheel, said it gave her better emotional distance. I didn't argue. Maple Drive hadn't changed. The neighbors still kept their hedges trimmed like a competition. Mrs. Langley's flamingo statue still leaned a little too far left on the front lawn. The mailboxes stood in their uneven row like old men at a bus stop. And there, in the middle of it all, was my home. Or rather, the place where my life used to live. The shutters had been painted white. My green ones, the ones Derek hung the summer before he died, were gone. The tulip bed had been torn out. In its place, fresh gravel and two sleek little boxwood plants that looked like they belonged to a catalog. There was a shiny blue SUV in the driveway. A man and a woman, probably in their 40s, stood by the trunk unloading boxes. Buyers? Linda muttered. New owners, looks like. Let's keep driving, I said. But she didn't. She parked 2 houses down and looked at me. You want to talk to them, Evelyn? I don't even know what I'd say. Then let them say something first. I took a breath, checked my blouse buttons with shaking fingers, and opened the car door. As we approached, the woman spotted us first. She smiled politely, the way you do at strangers who might be neighbors. She had short blonde hair and long arms that carried too many grocery bags at once. Hello there, she called. Are you from next door? I shook my head. No, I used to live here. Her eyes lit with recognition. Oh, you're Evelyn. I blinked. You know my name? Of course. Your daughter mentioned you. Margaret, right? Said you'd moved into a place across town. My stomach turned. She told you that? The woman nodded, setting the bags on the ground. Yes. She said you were transitioning to assisted care, and they were handling things on your behalf. I'm so sorry if this is sudden. We assumed everything was settled. Did you meet her in person? Oh, yes. Both her and her husband. Lovely people. Very organized. She hesitated, then added, honestly, it all went surprisingly fast. We didn't even have to go through the usual inspection nonsense. They said the house was a family property, and they just wanted it passed on quickly. I felt Linda step slightly closer beside me. I understand, I said quietly. Can I ask something? Of course. Did you see any signs that I wasn't part of the process? The woman glanced at her husband, who had now come around the car to join her. He looked wary, as if someone had whispered the word lawsuit into his ear. Well, the woman said, choosing her words carefully, we did wonder. Just a little. Margaret avoided questions about occupancy. The house was fully furnished when we toured it. Still lived in, not staged. It was, I said. The man cleared his throat. Is there a legal issue we should know about? Linda stepped in smoothly. There might be. That's for the courts to decide. You're not at fault, don't worry. But we may request documents from the transaction if this goes to hearing. The woman looked genuinely distressed. I hope this wasn't done against your will. I looked at her. She had the keys in her hand, a hopeful new homeowner, proud of her clean driveway and fresh paint. It was, I said, but that's not your fault. We didn't stay long. I didn't need a tour. I already knew where everything was, or used to be. The squeaky floorboard near the kitchen, the dent in the hallway from Derek's ladder, the doorframe with Margaret's childhood height marks carved in pencil. They painted over that, too, I'm sure. As we walked back to the car, I asked Linda, do you think they believe me? She started the ignition. They didn't need to. You believe you. That's the point. But I wasn't sure. Seeing someone else unloading groceries into the place where my life had unfolded, it hurt more than I expected. It wasn't just walls and windows. It was where I'd taught Margaret to make tea, where Derek kissed my forehead before work, where I'd laughed, cried, grown old, and now it was someone else's. Legally, but not cleanly, not righteously. That evening, we sat on Linda's porch with tea and an old Afghan across our knees. Autumn crept in around the edges. I need to do more than wait, I said. I want my own copy of those documents, the ones I supposedly signed. You will, she said. The lawyer will subpoena them. Not good enough. I want to see them now. She looked at me, then gave a slow nod. I know someone in records, at the registrar's satellite office. It's unofficial, but he owes me. Saturday morning, we drove out again. A quiet building off Route 9, no signs, just a county seal by the door. Inside, a balding man in a cardigan greeted Linda like an old friend. In 10 minutes, we had copies. Not just of the sale, but of the trust rewrite, the power of attorney shift, every signature. I studied them one by one. My name flowed across the pages, but the loop of my J was off. The slant inconsistent. One page dated at a time I knew I'd been asleep. They forged it, I said, the words tasting like metal, or manipulated me into signing while I was under. Linda leaned in. That's enough. We'll win this. I didn't answer. I just kept staring at the ink. Because no matter how careful they were, they forgot one thing. I still knew how I wrote my name. The lawyer's office smelled faintly of lemon polish and paper. It was Monday morning, and Eleanor Greer was already waiting when Linda and I arrived. She had a fresh file in front of her, neatly clipped, with my name on the tab. "We have what we need to proceed," she said without preamble. "I've reviewed the signature comparisons. The discrepancies are noticeable, especially on the deed and amended trust documents. The timing helps us. They coincide with a window when you were likely sedated." She looked up at me. "Are you ready for this?" I nodded. "Yes." "Then we'll file a petition to void the power of attorney, request a formal handwriting analysis, and begin discovery. If we can show the documents were obtained through deception, or without your full capacity, we have a strong case." "What happens to the house in the meantime?" I asked. "Nothing, legally, unless we get an injunction. But I'll file a motion to freeze any further transfers or resale attempts. If the new owners are cooperative, we'll try to settle. If not, we press forward." She pushed the file toward me. "You'll need to sign this affidavit, your statement, under penalty of perjury, that you did not knowingly authorize the sale." I took the pen. My hand didn't tremble. When I was finished, Eleanor nodded. "And now we serve your daughter and her husband with formal notice." "How long do they have to respond?" Linda asked. 21 days. "Then let's not give them 22. The courier delivered the notice by 1:08 p.m. I know because Margaret called me at 1:47. I didn't answer. She called again. Then Dean texted, "Evelyn, we need to talk. What's going on? Why are we getting court papers?" By evening, Margaret sent a longer message. "Mom, this is all a huge misunderstanding. You're confused. Let's just meet and discuss. No need for lawyers. We love you. We were only trying to help." I stared at that last line for a long time. We were only trying to help. No, they weren't. They were trying to get what they wanted. Quietly, cleanly, without resistance. And they didn't think I'd push back. They counted on my silence. I didn't respond. The next day, Eleanor received an email from their attorney, a man named Walker Lindstrom, from a mid-tier firm that usually handled real estate transactions. Too polished, too distant. Walker suggested an amicable resolution. Eleanor replied with 2 words: "Not interested." We kept moving. Over the next week, I gave a statement to a court-appointed psychologist. We talked for nearly 2 hours about memory, capacity, clarity. He asked why I hadn't fought back earlier. I told him the truth. Because I didn't know how. But now I do. Eleanor filed a motion to suspend the effects of the amended trust. The judge granted it within 72 hours. Suddenly, Margaret and Dean no longer had access to my accounts, to my medical directives, to anything but their growing sense of alarm. I imagined them in their big kitchen, rereading the court documents, trying to control the panic rising behind their tight, polite smiles. I imagined Margaret telling Dean, "She's just doing this to hurt us." No, I was doing it to stop the hurt. By the end of the second week, the court ordered a handwriting analysis. We handed over samples, old checks, birthday cards, even a grocery list I'd scribbled 2 days before the supposed signing. In contrast, the signed deed looked like a limp imitation, a shadow of my hand. Linda sat beside me at each step, never rushed, never judged. Her support was quiet but unshakable, like an old beam that had held up more than one ceiling. "You know," she said one night over dinner, "I think they never expected you to question them. That's the worst part." "They didn't," I agreed. "They thought I'd shrug, maybe cry a little, and then fade into whatever quiet place they'd prepared. But you didn't fade." "No." I looked out the window. I woke up. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I added, "They stole a house, but they underestimated a woman." Linda smiled. Let them learn. A week later, Eleanor called with news. The handwriting expert confirmed what we suspected. The signatures were not consistent with your known samples. The one on the deed shows signs of being guided, possibly even traced. And the power of attorney? Same. Weak alignment. Inconsistent slant. It strengthens our case. I exhaled. It was working. It wouldn't bring the tulip bed back. Or Derek's coffee mug on the windowsill. But it was something. A step. A reckoning. That evening, I received one final message from Margaret. Mom, I don't know what you want anymore. We were trying to give you comfort, ease, a new chapter. You're blowing everything out of proportion. This is going to cost everyone so much, including you. I stared at the words. Then I turned off the phone. She was wrong. This wasn't going to cost me anything. It was going to return something I should never have had to ask for. My name, my voice, my power. The bank visit was long overdue. I'd delayed it for weeks, not out of fear, but because the house and the legal filings had taken up so much energy. But now that the amended trust was suspended and Eleanor had put a freeze on the financial powers Margaret and Dean had used, it was time to take back the rest. Linda drove me, again. She insisted. Besides, she said, I want to see the face of that branch manager when he hears what they tried to pull. The bank was modern, too much glass and too little privacy. But I'd banked there for over 2 decades. Margaret had added herself as an authorized party back when Derek passed. Just in case, she said. In case of what? I'd asked her. In case you need help someday. Turns out, what I'd needed help with was her. The manager, Mr. Kaplan, was a lean man in his 50s, with steel gray hair and a tie that looked like it hadn't left his desk drawer since 2003. He greeted us in that cautious tone people reserve for customers who might become problems. Mrs. Jarvis, he said, I've reviewed your request with some confusion. You want to revoke all secondary access and halt any automated transfers? Yes, I said. But your daughter is no longer my proxy, I interrupted, and has been misusing access. I want full control reinstated to me only, effective immediately. Kaplan blinked. This is quite a shift from the arrangements we've had in place. I'm quite a shift from the woman who agreed to them. He cleared his throat, glanced at Linda, who gave him a perfectly neutral stare, and began typing. I see your daughter and son-in-law set up monthly withdrawals to multiple service providers, including payments to a residence. Sunny Hollow, I said. Yes, I'm aware. And then there are insurance premiums, private school tuition for their son, landscaping fees for a property not registered under your name. How much? Kaplan looked startled. Pardon? How much money has left my account under Margaret's authority in the past 12 months? He clicked around, then turned his monitor slightly so I could see. 184,732. 13. The room swayed just a little. I leaned back in my chair, folded my hands. Print every transaction, I said. I want a full record. Kaplan printed, stapled, and slid the pages across the desk. And now, I said, we're going to revoke all powers of access, delete all automatic transactions, and flag any further attempts. He hesitated. Do you want to keep any family members as backup in case of emergency? I want a clean sheet, I said. Only one backup, Linda Kessler. No blood, just trust. Kaplan adjusted his glasses. Understood. It took 45 minutes to process everything. I signed more papers than I had in the last 6 years combined. Each one steadied my breathing, straightened my spine. By the end, my accounts were mine again. Not a favor, not a family sacrifice. mine. Back at Linda's, we laid out the printouts on her dining room table. Line by line, we went through them. $7,400 to a private elementary school. $3,850 to a landscaping company with a Beverly Hills address. $12,000 to a spa and wellness resort in Palm Springs. $2,100 monthly to client care services at Sunny Hollow. Didn't they say the assisted living was covered by insurance? Linda asked. They did, I said. Apparently, I've been subsidizing myself. At premium rates. The last page nearly made me laugh. A payment labeled Family Respite Fund, $500 recurring, with a memo that simply said, for stress relief. Dean and Margaret had paid themselves for the stress of dealing with me. I sat back, stunned, then furious, then oddly still. That's what I was to them, I said. A chore, a bank account with a temper. No, Linda said firmly. You were their foundation, their excuse for not taking responsibility for their own lives, but no more. I nodded. Then I did one more thing. I asked Eleanor to update my will. 2 days later, I sat in her office again, signing the new draft. Everything, house proceeds, remaining investments, pension residuals, was now placed into a protected trust. One beneficiary, my grandson, Nathan, Margaret's son, the only person in that family who had ever called me just to say hi, who had dropped by to fix my fence, unasked, who had sent a postcard from Spain written in wobbly high school cursive saying, Grandma, I saw an old woman with your haircut and thought of you. I miss your stories. Love, Nate. I hadn't seen him since the sale. I didn't even know if he knew, but he would. Eleanor read the final clause aloud. And to my daughter Margaret and her husband Dean, I leave my silence. I signed it with a steady hand. You're sure? Eleanor asked. I am, I said. This isn't about revenge. It's about honesty. I want what's mine to go to someone who saw me as more than an obligation. Eleanor nodded. Then it's done. I walked out of that office lighter than I'd felt in years. Not free. Not yet. The fight for the house wasn't over, but the weight of being financially entangled with people who saw me as expendable? Gone. They sold the house while I slept. But they forgot one thing. I could buy back my freedom. And this time, it wouldn't cost me myself. It hit me one afternoon, somewhere between folding laundry and slicing an apple, that the quiet I used to dread had changed. Back in Sunny Hollow, silence meant I'd been erased. A kind of institutional hush, built to smooth over resistance. But here, in Linda's modest home, quiet was something else. It had room for breath, for memory, for choices. I could stand in the kitchen and feel the floor under my feet and know that no one would interrupt it to hand me papers I didn't understand. I wasn't just away from them. I was home again, even without a house. Still, not everything inside me had settled. There were moments, short ones, sharp ones, when doubt crept in the middle of the night, at the bottom of the laundry basket, while staring at my own handwriting on court documents. Maybe Margaret was right. Maybe I was making too much of it. Maybe they had meant well. Maybe this would all end in some mess where I'd be the villain. The difficult old woman, unwilling to see reason. I didn't cry, but my hands trembled sometimes, alone. One evening, Linda caught me staring at the porch railing, my tea untouched. You're thinking yourself into a hole, she said gently. I don't want to become bitter, I murmured. I don't want to lose who I was trying to defend. You're not bitter, she said. You're just hurt, and honest about it. I nodded, but the doubt stayed. Then the phone rang. It was Nathan. Grandma? His voice cracked like he hadn't spoken my name out loud in weeks. Can I come see you? He arrived the next morning. Tall, lean, the same cowlick he had at 5. A little older around the eyes than I remembered, but still Nathan. When he stepped through the door, I saw something strange in his posture. Not embarrassment, not even guilt, but a kind of quiet grief, heavy like a coat he couldn't shake. He hugged me like someone afraid I'd disappear. I didn't know, he said. We sat in the living room, just the two of us, no distractions. Linda had stepped out, saying she needed to check on her garden, though her tomatoes had long since withered. I found out last week, Nathan said. Dad left some bank documents open on his laptop. I saw the transfer. Saw your name missing. I confronted him. What did he say? That you were confused, that it was all handled legally, that you'd agreed, but something felt off. You've always been sharper than both of them combined. I gave a half smile. Sharpness doesn't protect you from manipulation. I should have checked on you sooner, he said. I guess I thought they'd never go that far. They went further, I said. But I'm here now. I want to help, he said suddenly. Anything. However I can. You already are, I said. You came. He sat back. Do you need to talk about it? I mean, tell me what really happened. So I did. I told him everything. The kitchen, the folder, the fog of those pills, the real estate agents on my porch, Sunny Hollow, the yellow pill organizer, the signatures, the visit to my old house, the checkbook that vanished, the trust they rewrote in my sleep. By the end, Nathan's eyes were wet, his hands clenched. They stole your life, he whispered. They tried, I said, but they didn't expect me to have a spine still. I'm so sorry. You don't need to be sorry, I said. You need to remember. He looked confused. Remember how easy it is, I continued, to turn someone into a burden when they're no longer useful, or when their resistance becomes inconvenient. Don't let anyone do that to the people you love. Not ever. He nodded, quiet, absorbing it the way only young people can when they finally realize the adults around them weren't always right. And Nathan? Yeah? I changed the will. His eyebrows lifted. You're the only one who ever called to say you missed my stories. That matters more than any signature on a trust. He looked stunned. Grandma? I didn't come here for that. I know, I said. That's why you're getting it. We sat in silence again, but not the hard kind, the good kind, the kind you can breathe in. Before he left, he turned at the door. You want me to testify if it comes to court? I smiled. You just did. That night, I sat on the porch with my tea and watched the moon rise behind Linda's maple. No music, no TV, just the sounds of a world still moving, honestly, slowly, without permission. I'd cut the cord. Margaret and Dean no longer controlled my money, my papers, my location, or my voice. And now, the thing they feared most was happening. Other people were starting to believe me. Not because I was loud, not because I had power, but because the truth, once told plainly, always finds its way. They came to see me on a Sunday. I didn't invite them. Linda was out grocery shopping, and I was alone in the house for the first time in days. I'd just set a kettle on when I saw their car pull up. Margaret in the passenger seat, Dean driving. The same dark blue sedan I'd watched roll into my driveway back when it was still mine. I didn't move, just stood at the kitchen window, watching. They didn't knock right away. Dean paced in front of the steps, Margaret adjusting her scarf like she was preparing for a speech. Then, 3 soft knocks, like a child asking for forgiveness. I opened the door, but I didn't step aside. Margaret's face folded into something like a smile. "Hi, Mom." Dean gave a stiff nod. "Evelyn?" I didn't answer. "We just wanted to talk," Margaret said. "Face to face." "You had your chance for that," I said. "Back when you were selling my house behind my back." Her lips tightened. "Can we come in?" "No." She blinked, caught off guard. "It's cold." "There's no weather threshold for betrayal," I said. "Say what you came to say." Dean cleared his throat. "Look, this has gone too far. Lawyers, court filings, Nathan, this is hurting everyone. It doesn't have to be like this." I raised an eyebrow. "It already is like this. You made sure of that." Margaret took a step forward, lowering her voice. "You're angry. I get it. But you weren't safe, Mom. The stairs, the gardening tools, the mail piling up. You were overwhelmed." "I was living," I snapped. "I was aging, not failing. You decided that was inconvenient." She opened her mouth, but I didn't let her speak. "You didn't talk to me. You talked around me. Over me. You came into my kitchen with that folder like it was nothing. Like I'd just nod and hand over a life I built brick by brick with a man you barely remember." Dean looked away. "I read every line of what you submitted to the court," I continued. "You called me confused. You claimed I expressed uncertainty about daily functions. You said I was relieved when you took over." Margaret flushed. "We were trying to keep you from suffering." "You mean from interfering?" She sighed, defensive now. "It's not black and white, Mom. It's not as clean as you want to make it." "Oh, I agree," I said. "It's messier. It's uglier. It's full of assumptions you made about what I could handle, what I deserved, and what made your lives easier." Dean finally spoke. "We didn't mean for it to hurt you. But you meant to do it without asking. That part wasn't an accident." Silence stretched between us. Then Margaret softened her voice again, too carefully, like I was a vase on a shaky shelf. "What do you want, Mom? You want us to say we're sorry? To undo what's been done? I want you to see what you did. I want you to stop calling theft love. I want you to stop pretending you acted out of kindness when what you really acted out of was convenience." Dean crossed his arms. "You're being dramatic." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "No, Dean, you haven't seen dramatic. You've seen controlled, graceful, quiet. But you stepped over that line, and I'm not stepping back." Margaret blinked quickly. "You'd really rather go to court than just talk?" "This is me talking. The rest will happen in a courtroom with records and witnesses and experts who don't care how tired you say you were." She looked like she might cry. I didn't flinch. "I miss you," she said softly. I shook my head. "You miss control." Dean touched her arm. "Let's go." As they turned, Margaret paused. "I hope you can live with what this becomes." I answered with calm I didn't know I had. "I am living with it. What I couldn't live with was being erased." They walked to the car in silence. No shouting, no apology, no resolution. But I didn't need one. Not anymore. I closed the door, made my tea, and sat at the kitchen table as the steam rose in slow curls. I wasn't unshaken. I wasn't immune. But I was done shrinking to fit the version of me they found easier to manage. They used to speak for me. Now I was speaking to them. By the time my story reached the neighborhood, I didn't have to say much at all. It started small. A comment at the hair salon, a neighbor overhearing something at the pharmacy. Then someone mentioned it at church, not in a scandalized whisper, but in a low, thoughtful tone, like, "Did you hear about Evelyn?" They tried to take everything. And she fought. I didn't seek attention. But I didn't hide either. When Mrs. Langley from 2 doors down called to check in, I answered. When the postman asked if the rumors were true, I said yes. When the grocery clerk said her mother was going through something similar, I gave her Eleanor's number. And somewhere in that slow unraveling of silence, my story became a signal. I wasn't the only one. At least 3 other women called Linda after hearing what happened to me. One had been coerced into signing her pension over to a nephew who just needed help for a while. Another had moved into a facility after a bad fall, only to realize her condo had been sold while she was still in rehab. None of them had gone to court. Yet. That week, I gave Eleanor permission to file a motion allowing my case records, minus the financial details, to be made public. The local paper ran a brief story titled, Elder Home Transfer Under Legal Scrutiny. No names, but everyone knew. The day after it ran, I saw Margaret's car drive slowly past Linda's house. She didn't stop. I didn't wave. When the court date was finally announced, it felt both too soon and too late. 3 months had passed. 3 months of depositions, assessments, notarized responses, and formal objections. Margaret and Dean's attorney filed motions to delay, to suppress, to limit scope. Eleanor knocked them down, one by one, like someone playing chess, while the other side kept kicking the table. But now, we had a date. October 18th. And this time, I wouldn't be watching from the sidelines. The week before the hearing, Eleanor scheduled a prep session in her office. Linda came with me. She always did. The moment we walked in, Eleanor handed me a binder. Your testimony, she said. It's structured, but in your voice. We want the judge to see you. Not a lawyer's puppet, not a confused senior. You, I opened the binder. Read the first line aloud. My name is Evelyn Jarvis. I am not confused. I am not declining. I am not someone who agreed to disappear. I looked up. Did you write that? I just typed what I heard when you first walked into my office, Eleanor said. We went over the statement, the exhibits, the timeline. Linda helped me rehearse, not like a performance, but like a reclamation. By the end, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to court to win back a house. I was going to show them I'd never truly left it. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. Not out of fear, but out of steadiness. The kind you feel before a big storm. Not panicked, not calm, but rooted. I sat by the window and watched the wind move through Linda's maple trees. At some point, I heard the gate creak. Footsteps. I turned off the lamp and waited. A minute later, an envelope slid under the door. Linda, half asleep in her robe, beat me to it. She held it up. Margaret's handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a threat. Just a note. You're doing this to make us look bad. We never meant to hurt you. This could have stayed private. Linda crumpled it and threw it in the trash. I picked it back out, smoothed it on the table, then wrote my reply on the back in the same pen. You were counting on it staying private. That's the difference. We didn't send it. Didn't need to. Tomorrow, I'd say it and everything else out loud, in a room with witnesses, on the record. And this time, no one would speak over me. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No sweeping ceilings or echoing footsteps. Just a modest room with wooden benches, cream walls, and the kind of fluorescent lights that made everyone look tired, no matter how much sleep they'd had. I wore navy, not black. I wasn't mourning. I was returning. Linda sat beside me, calm and composed, with a legal pad even though she wasn't taking notes. Just being there was enough. Eleanor stood by the counsel table, flipping through her binder one last time, expression focused and unreadable. On the other side of the room, Margaret and Dean sat in stiff silence, their lawyer whispering something neither of them seemed to hear. When the judge entered, we stood. He was older than I expected. Sharp eyes, patient face. The kind of man who'd seen 1,000 ugly family battles and was no longer surprised by any of them. "Let's begin," he said. Eleanor made the opening statement. Clear, firm, without dramatics. She laid out the facts, the suspicious timeline, the inconsistencies in the signature, the evidence of altered intent, the medical documents indicating I'd been under medication during the time of the deed transfer. Then she handed over the handwriting analysis. The judge read in silence. When it was time for me to testify, I walked to the witness chair slowly, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to feel every step. I sat down, raised my hand, and swore to tell the truth. Eleanor asked the questions. "Mrs. Jarvis, do you recall signing a document that transferred ownership of your home to another party?" "No," I said. "I was told I was signing a safety measure. I didn't know they'd used it to sell my home." "Were you under the influence of any medication during that time?" "Yes." "Did you authorize your daughter and her husband to assume control of your estate?" "No. I authorized them to assist, not to overtake." "And when did you learn that the house had been sold?" "When a stranger rang my doorbell to congratulate me on the closing." There was a small murmur in the courtroom. The judge didn't interrupt. Eleanor stepped back. "Your witness." Margaret's lawyer stood. His name was Walker. His suit was more expensive than it needed to be. He smiled like he was talking to a lost child. "Mrs. Jarvis, isn't it true that your daughter cared for you during a difficult time?" "Yes." "And isn't it true she arranged medical appointments, helped with errands, ensured your safety?" "Yes." "Would you say she's a neglectful person?" "No. I'd say she's a controlling one." Walker shifted slightly. "You have no direct memory of signing the documents in question, do you?" "No." "Then how can you be sure you didn't?" "Because I know myself," I said. "And I know how I write my name. I know what kind of decisions I make when I'm awake. And I know what betrayal feels like, especially when it's done in a whisper." The courtroom fell still. Walker opened his mouth again, but the judge raised a hand. "That's enough, counselor." I was dismissed. As I walked back to my seat, I glanced at Margaret. Her face was pale, not red with anger, white with recognition. Dean stared at his lap. After both sides finished presenting, the judge didn't rule immediately. He said he'd review all materials and issue a decision within the week. We left the courtroom and stepped into the bright fall air. The sky was too blue for such a heavy day. I exhaled slowly. "You did it," Linda said. "Not yet," I replied. "But I said it. And that's more than they ever gave me." We stopped for pie on the way home, because that's what you do when you need to remember you're still part of the world, still allowed to take up space in it. "Over coffee," Linda said. "You know, even if you don't get the house back, they'll never undo this." "This?" She tapped her chest. "What they broke. You reclaimed it." I didn't speak, just took another bite of pie and let the weight inside me shift into something steadier. For years, I'd lived quietly, but silence is not the same as peace. Now, I had both. And whatever the judge decided, one thing was certain: they'd never take it from me again. The decision came on a Wednesday morning. I was folding towels, blue ones, slightly frayed at the edges, when Eleanor called. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the current beneath it. "It's done," she said. The judge ruled in our favor. I sat down, towel still in my hands. The deed transfer has been declared invalid, she continued. So has the amended trust. The power of attorney has been officially revoked and flagged. All future access by Margaret and Dean is prohibited unless reauthorized in court, which won't happen. You're back in full control. I couldn't speak. Evelyn, she said softer now, you won. Not just legally, not just technically, but wholly. That afternoon, we drove back to Maple Drive. Linda offered. One more ride, she said. Closure. I didn't ask her to park. I just wanted to see it again. Not as a victim, not as a ghost, but as myself. The house looked the same from the outside. Still white shutters, still boxwoods in place of tulips, still the new couple's car in the drive, but it no longer hurt to look at, because it wasn't about bricks and paint. It was about the woman who'd once stood inside those walls and refused to disappear. Eleanor was working on the next steps: formal restitution, negotiation with the buyers, and if necessary, litigation for damages. But she told me, "You can take your time. You decide what justice looks like from here." I wasn't sure yet. Did I want the house back? Maybe. Did I need it? Not anymore. What I'd needed was to be seen, to be heard, to make them say my name not as an obligation but as an equal. And I had that now. Even the buyers, the young couple, had written a letter through their lawyer expressing their regret and offering to cooperate. They'd bought in good faith. I didn't blame them. Margaret and Dean, they hadn't reached out again, not since court, not a word, and I didn't need one. Not after what they'd done, not after what I'd reclaimed. Linda and I sat in the car for a long while. "You know," she said, "you could turn this into something." "What do you mean?" "Help others. Write. Speak. Tell your story to people who think it can't happen to them." "I'm not a public speaker." "No," she said, "but you're a truth teller. That's rarer." I looked out at the porch I'd once swept clean every Thursday, at the window where Derek used to sit with his morning paper. "I just wanted to age with dignity," I said quietly. Linda nodded. "And you are." The wind picked up slightly, carrying the scent of cut grass and autumn. I closed my eyes. For once, I didn't feel like I had to prepare for anything. No next legal move, no damage control, just breath, a clear day, a quiet victory. Back at her house, we had tea and a slice of the same banana bread she always claimed was accidental. We talked about the garden, the neighbor's barking dog, the rain gutters she kept meaning to clean. Life had returned, not to what it was, but to what it could be. That evening, I sat on the porch alone, wrapped in an old shawl, and thought about Margaret. I didn't hate her. I didn't even wish her harm. I wished her truth. I hoped one day she'd wake up and see what she'd done. Not just to me, but to herself. Because you don't betray someone without leaving a crack in your own mirror. They'd taken everything they thought I wouldn't fight for, and I had taken back everything they thought I'd surrendered. Not with shouting, not with vengeance, but with clarity. And that, more than any deed, was mine to keep. The courtroom was behind us. The ruling had been filed. The restitution claim was under review. And yet, I wasn't rushing to claim what I'd lost. The truth was, I didn't know if I wanted the house back. Not because it had changed, though it had, but because I had. What once symbolized roots and memory now stood for a fight I had already won. Returning would be like trying to step into an old coat that no longer fit, not because it shrank, but because I'd grown. Eleanor called with options. "The buyers are willing to negotiate. Full return or a sale with profit to you. Or you can accept restitution based on market value plus damages. It's your call. I told her I'd think about it. Instead, I went to the park. Not the big one, but the small square with the iron benches and duck pond where Derek used to read aloud to Margaret when she was little. I hadn't been there in years. I sat near the edge of the water, watching the slow circles the wind made on the surface. Children ran by. A teenager threw bread into the pond and laughed when the ducks swarmed. Life went on, as it always does, indifferent and generous all at once. A woman my age sat on the bench next to mine. She had soft gray curls and a wool coat that had seen better seasons. She turned and said, "You're Evelyn Jarvis, aren't you?" I nodded, slowly. "I read about your case. My sister went through something similar. Didn't have the strength to fight. She ended up in a home where they forgot her birthday 3 years in a row." "I'm sorry," I said. She looked straight at me. "Don't be. You gave her back a little dignity. Even if it's too late for court, it's not too late for the truth." I didn't know what to say, so I just sat with it, let it settle like leaves on water. That evening, I told Linda my decision. "I'm not taking the house," I said. "Let them keep it. I'll accept restitution. But I won't rebuild a life in a place that witnessed my erasure." She nodded, unsurprised. "You don't need it. You've already rebuilt yourself." "I want the funds to go into a living trust," I said. "For Nathan, with protections. No one can touch it but him. And when he's older, he'll know what it came from. Not in bitterness, but in warning." Linda smiled. "He'll understand. You raised him better than they raised his parents." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for days. Freedom doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it's just the quiet sound of a woman setting down a burden and deciding not to pick it up again. A few days later, I got a letter from the court. Not about the house, about the damages. The judge had ruled for a full financial reversal. Market value restitution, plus penalties for unauthorized use of power of attorney and recovery of personal funds used during the fraudulent period. It was more than I expected, more than I'd lost even. Eleanor called. "You'll have full access within 30 days. Clean, no strings, no appeals." I thanked her. She said, "You earned it." But that wasn't what stayed with me. What stayed was the last line of the ruling, where the judge wrote, "Mrs. Jarvis's clarity of memory, autonomy of will, and dignity of presence are not in question. Her testimony was compelling, consistent, and entirely credible. This court recognizes not only the legal, but the human cost she has carried, and withstood." I read it twice, then folded the letter and placed it in a drawer I rarely opened. Not to hide it, but to mark that part of the journey complete. That night, I dreamed of nothing. No courtrooms, no signatures. Just sky. Open, quiet, and mine. A few weeks later, I opened the window to let in the morning air and realized something strange. The ache had faded. Not the memory. That stayed sharp. But the tension in my chest, the stiffness behind my eyes, the invisible armor I'd worn for months. It had all softened, like a house that had finally exhaled after too many storms. Linda and I still had tea most evenings. She'd started planting again, said the tomatoes might stand a chance next season. We joked about getting a little dog. Not a real plan. Just talk. The kind that says we're still here. And I wrote. Not a memoir. Not some grand statement. Just notes. Pages for myself. For Nathan. For anyone who one day might wonder how a woman could wake up one morning with no house, no rights, and no voice, and still find her way back to all three. I called the folder, "They Forgot I Was Still Watching." Because that's the truth of it. They didn't expect resistance. They didn't plan for memory. They mistook stillness for surrender. Nathan came by one Sunday. No warning. Just showed up with a grocery bag full of apples and 2 thermoses of cider. "You always liked orchard stuff in the fall," he said. We sat on the porch, boots up on the railing, the cold creeping just close enough to keep us honest. He told me he was applying to law school, said it with a little hesitation, like he wasn't sure how I'd take it. "You think you'll like it?" I asked. "I think I'll be good at it. Especially defending people who don't know they're allowed to fight back." I didn't cry, but I felt something rise in me like breath after a long silence. "You'll be more than good," I said. "You'll be necessary." He nodded, then pulled out a worn envelope from his coat pocket. "I've been holding on to this," he said. "From Mom." I didn't move to take it. She wrote it after the court ruling, didn't send it, just left it in a drawer. I found it when I stopped by the house. I raised an eyebrow. "The house?" "I needed to see it," he said. It felt empty, not just of things, of truth, of presence. I looked at the envelope, then shook my head. "Keep it. Whatever she didn't say to my face, I don't need in her handwriting." He tucked it back into his pocket without protest. "You don't hate her," he said quietly. "No," I replied. "I just stopped needing her to be who she said she was." We sat there for a long time. The wind picked up. Leaves danced across the porch. Before he left, Nathan turned to me and said, "You know, I've never been prouder of anyone in my life." I looked at him, a young man I'd helped raise who still carried decency like armor. "You will be," I said, "when it's your turn." The final restitution came through that Friday. Clean wire, no dispute, no letters, no apologies. Eleanor called just to confirm. "We've officially closed the file," she said. "But if you ever need me again—" "I won't," I said. "But thank you for reminding me my voice was still mine." "You never needed reminding," she said. "You just needed a witness." I kept one thing from the old house. A doorframe panel, the one with Margaret's childhood height marks. Linda's handyman friend had pulled it for me weeks earlier, quietly. I'd almost forgotten. I mounted it in the hallway of Linda's house, not for nostalgia, not for forgiveness, but as proof that I remember everything: what grew, what was measured, what was taken, what returned. If you've read this far, maybe you're wondering what you're supposed to feel. Rage? Relief? A desire to hug your mother? I won't tell you what to do, but I'll say this. One day, someone will hand you a folder. They'll smile kindly, speak softly, use words like safe, practical, necessary. Before you sign, pause. Ask yourself, is this love or is this control wrapped in comfort? Because I almost didn't ask, and they almost got away with it. But almost is not the same as always, and silence is not the same as peace. Not anymore.